7:30 on a Sunday night in Queens, New York. A 12-year-old boy walks into his aunt's apartment. He's just coming home from a family dinner. He's probably thinking about homework or video games or what he'll eat for a snack. Then he opens the door. The apartment is quiet, too quiet. He calls out for his mom. No answer. He walks into the bedroom where his two little cousins sleep. Daniela is 2, Yoselin is 1. They're not sleeping. Their mother, Deisy Garcia, is on the floor in another room. Blood everywhere. A knife with a broken blade nearby. Another knife on the kitchen counter. The boy runs out screaming. That 12-year-old's name is never released by the media, but we know he lived. We know he'll carry that image for the rest of his life. And we know that what he saw that night, January 18, 2014, could have been prevented, because Deisy Garcia tried to stop it. She tried so hard. She called the police. She filed reports. She begged for help. But her words were written in Spanish. And in the New York Police Department system, Spanish might as well have been invisible. This is the story of Deisy Garcia, a young mother who did everything right, and a system that did almost everything wrong. Let's go back, way back, to a small town in Guatemala you've probably never heard of. Totonicapan is a highland city in western Guatemala. It's known for its textiles, its Mayan heritage, and its cold mornings. Deisy Garcia was born there around 1992. Exact records are fuzzy because she was undocumented in the U.S., and her family guarded her privacy fiercely. She grew up speaking Quechua, no Spanish. Her family was Ladino, meaning Spanish-speaking and mixed heritage. But life in Totonicapan was hard. Poverty was everywhere. Opportunities were few. Young women often had two choices: marry young or leave. Deisy chose to leave. She came to the United States as a teenager, crossing the border without papers like so many others. She settled in Queens, New York, specifically the neighborhood of Jamaica. If you've ever been there, you know it's a chaotic, vibrant, crowded place. Over 200,000 people packed into a few square miles. The smell of roasted corn and fried plantains from street carts, the sound of horns blaring, kids laughing, and a dozen different languages mixing together on the sidewalk. Deisy found a small apartment on 111th Avenue near 166th Street. She lived with her aunt, Sarah Alvarado, and her cousins. She got a job, though we don't know exactly where, and she started going to church. Iglesia de Dios, a Pentecostal congregation where she joined a dance group called Rosas de Saron, Roses of Sharon. Her friends say she was the life of the group. Every Monday, rain or shine, she'd show up with her two little girls in tow. Daniela, born 2011. Yoselin, born January 2013, just a week before the murders, actually. Yoselin's first birthday was January 11, 2014. She died 7 days later. Daisy's pastor, Jorge Garcia, no relation, remembered her as Una Mujer Alegre, a happy woman. He said she loved her daughters more than anything. She would carry them both on her hips and still find time to dance for God. But behind that smile, something dark was growing. Miguel Mejia Ramos. That's the name you need to remember. He met Deisy sometime around 2009 or 2010. He was also from Guatemala, though from a different region. He was a construction worker, strong and quiet. He had a temper that he mostly hid from outsiders. They got married, not in a big church wedding, more like a quiet ceremony with a few family members. Daisy's mother, Luzmina, later said she never trusted Miguel. He had eyes that looked through you, not at you, she told a reporter. The abuse started small, a sharp word here, a push there. Then it escalated. By 2013, Deisy was living in fear. Her Aunt Sarah saw bruises on Daisy's arms. Her cousins heard shouting through the thin walls of the apartment. One night, Miguel threw a phone at Daisy's head. Another night, he locked her out of the bedroom so she had to sleep on the floor with the babies. But Deisy didn't just suffer in silence. She fought back. Not physically, she was tiny, barely 5 feet tall. But she fought the only way she knew how. She called the police. And that's where our story takes its first tragic turn. Let me walk you through the timeline because the details matter. May 2013. Daisy calls 911. Police officers arrive at her apartment. She's shaking, crying, pointing to red marks on her neck. She tells the officers that Miguel assaulted her. They believe her at least enough to file a report. They hand her a domestic incident report form. It's the standard NYPD form, Form PD-3. Here's the thing about that form. It's available in multiple languages. Daisy asks for the Spanish version. The officer gives it to her. She sits down at the kitchen table, the same table where she'll later feed her daughter's breakfast, and she writes. In Spanish, she writes that she fears for her life. She writes that she fears for her daughter's lives. She writes that Miguel has threatened to kill her if she ever leaves him. Then she hands the form back to the officer. He puts it in a file, and that file, it goes into a drawer at the precinct, because no one translates it into English. Now you might be thinking, wait, doesn't the NYPD have translators? Yes, they do. They have a language line. They have bilingual officers. But on that day in May 2013, for reasons the NYPD later said they could not explain, Daisy's report was never translated. So it was never read by anyone in the domestic violence unit, never entered into any database that would flag Miguel as a threat, never used to get an order of protection, never used for anything at all. November 27, 2013. This time, it's the middle of the night, 2:40 a.m. to be exact. Daisy's Aunt Sarah is sleeping in the next room. She wakes up to screaming. She runs into the living room and finds Daisy on the floor, her hair pulled out in clumps, Miguel standing over her. He's holding Daisy's phone, he's just smashed it on the ground. Daisy calls 911 again. The police come. Miguel runs out the back door before they arrive, but Daisy gives a statement. Again, she uses the Spanish form. This time she writes, "My husband came home drunk. He pulled my hair. He kicked me twice. Then he grabbed my phone and ran. This morning he threatened to take my daughters away from me." The officer takes the report. He nods sympathetically. He says, "We'll look into it." He leaves. The report goes into a file. It is never translated. November 28, 2013. The very next day, Daisy is not going to give up. She walks to the 103rd Precinct Station House on 101st Avenue. She asks to speak to a domestic violence officer. She's told no one is available, so she fills out another follow-up complaint. She writes that she's scared to go home. She writes that she wants an order of protection. She writes that she's afraid Miguel will kill her. That report, you guessed it, never translated. 3 reports, 3 chances to intervene. 3 opportunities for a judge to sign a restraining order, for a social worker to offer shelter, for a cop to arrest Miguel and hold him for at least 24 hours. Nothing. Daisy's brother, Jose Garcia, was only 19 at the time. He told the New York Daily News, "My sister and her kids might still be alive if they had done their jobs. They had the reports. They had her words. They just didn't care because she spoke Spanish." That's harsh. But is it unfair? Let's think about that. Here's something most news reports didn't mention. Daisy's death wasn't the first warning sign. 6 months before she was killed, a group of women had already sued the NYPD over this exact problem. I'm not making this up. In August 2013, 6 Hispanic women and an organization called the Violence Intervention Program filed a federal class action lawsuit against New York City. Their claim: the NYPD systematically failed to provide translation services for domestic violence victims who didn't speak English, and because of that, those victims were being denied equal protection under the law. The lawsuit included heartbreaking stories. One woman, Aurette Macarno, called 911 after her husband pushed her down a flight of stairs. When police arrived, she tried to explain what happened in broken English. An officer told her in Spanish, "Cállate la boca," shut your mouth. Then they arrested her for disorderly conduct. Another woman, name withheld, said she was beaten so badly she lost vision in one eye. She filed a police report in Spanish. It sat untranslated for 3 weeks. By the time someone read it, her husband had already fled the state. The lawsuit was still pending when Deisy Garcia died. In fact, the judge hadn't even held a hearing yet. Edward Josephson, the lawyer representing the women, said something after Daisy's murder that still haunts me. Unfortunately, we're not surprised that something like this happened. We know that victims of domestic violence who don't speak English can't get the protection they need. Daisy's case is proof. Proof. That's a heavy word. Let me paint the scene for you. It's a Saturday. Cold by New York standards, about 25 degrees. Deisy spends the day at home with Daniela and Yoselin. Her Aunt Sarah is out running errands. Her cousins are at work or school. It's just Deisy and the girls. Miguel shows up around 6 p.m. He's been drinking. He's angry. We don't know exactly what triggered him, maybe the phone, maybe jealousy, maybe just the alcohol. But he grabs Daisy's cell phone and starts scrolling through it. He finds photos of Deisy with another man. Nothing explicit, just pictures from a party weeks earlier. But in Miguel's mind, this is proof of betrayal. He confronts Deisy. She denies it. He doesn't believe her. He goes to the kitchen and pulls out a butcher knife, the big one, the one you'd use to cut through bone. Then he walks into the bedroom where Deisy is lying down with the girls. Deisy sees the knife. She screams. She tries to run. She makes it to the living room, but he catches her. He stabs her once, twice, again and again. The knife blade breaks, snaps right off the handle. So Miguel goes back to the kitchen. He gets a second knife. He comes back and keeps stabbing. The autopsy later showed Deisy had over 30 stab wounds. 30. That's not rage. That's annihilation. Then he walks into the girls' bedroom. Here's where the details get almost unbearable. But we need to know them because this is what the system allowed to happen. According to the criminal complaint and later testimony, Miguel picked up 2-year-old Daniela first. He hugged her. He kissed her forehead. He whispered something witnesses later said it sounded like "Perdoname, Mija, forgive me, my daughter." Then he laid her back down on her bed, covered her with a blanket, and stabbed her. He did the same thing to Yoselin. 1 year old, not even walking yet, still in diapers. Then he washed his hands. He changed his clothes. He took Daisy's phone, the one he'd been so angry about, and he walked out the front door. He got into a car and started driving west, toward Texas. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He just drove. Around 7:30 p.m., Daisy's 12-year-old nephew, the one I mentioned at the beginning, comes home with his father, Romeo Chuck. Romeo is Daisy's uncle. They've been at a family dinner in another part of Queens. The apartment door is unlocked. That's odd. Deisy always locks it. The boy walks in first. He calls out, "Tia Deisy." No answer. He walks toward the bedroom. He sees a foot, then a leg, then blood. He runs out screaming for his father. Romeo Chuck later told the New York Post, "I pushed my son out the door and told him to run to the neighbor's house. Then I went inside. I saw Deisy on the floor. I knew she was dead. I went to the girl's room. Daniela was in her bed. Yoselin was in her crib. Both of them had blood on their chests." He called 911 at 7:41 p.m. The operator asked if anyone was breathing. Romeo said, "No, nobody." Police arrived within minutes. They found the broken knife blade under Daisy's body. They found the second knife on the kitchen counter, wiped clean. They found a bloody footprint leading out the back door, and they found the reports. The ones Deisy had filed months earlier, sitting in a file cabinet at the 103rd Precinct, untranslated, unread, useless. Miguel Mejia Ramos drove for 2 days. He went from Queens to Pennsylvania, then to Ohio, then to Indiana, then to Illinois, then to Missouri, then to Oklahoma, then to Texas. Over 1,800 miles. He didn't sleep much. He didn't stop for sightseeing. He just drove. He had one goal: get to the Mexican border and disappear. But here's the thing about a man who just murdered his wife and 2 babies: he leaves a trail. The police had his description. They had his car's license plate. They had his face on traffic cameras. On January 20, 2014, 2 days after the murders, a police officer in Schulenburg, Texas, spotted Miguel's car at a vehicle roadblock. Schulenburg is a tiny town between Houston and San Antonio, population about 3,000. Not the kind of place you'd expect to catch a quadruple murderer. The officer asked for Miguel's license. Miguel handed it over without a word. The officer ran the name through the system. A flag popped up, wanted for homicide in New York. The officer drew his gun. Step out of the vehicle. Miguel didn't resist. He didn't cry. He didn't confess. He just got out, put his hands behind his back, and let himself be handcuffed. When a detective asked him why he killed his daughters, Miguel gave an answer that still makes my blood run cold. I wanted to take them with me, but I didn't have car seats, so I killed them instead. No car seats, that's his explanation. Not insanity, not self-defense, not even a claim of accident, just no car seats. Daisy's mother, Luzmina Alvarado, was in Guatemala when she got the news. She remembers the phone ringing at 3 a.m. It was her sister Sarah. All Sarah said was, "Luzmina, come home. Daisy is gone. The babies are gone." Luzmina flew to New York the next day. She went straight to the morgue to identify her daughter's body. She told a reporter later, "I couldn't look at her face, I just held her hand. It was cold. So cold." Then she went to the 103rd Precinct to get copies of Daisy's reports. She wanted to see what her daughter had written. She wanted to know if Daisy had tried to warn someone. At the front desk, she asked for the reports. The officer said, "I'm sorry, I don't understand, I can't help you." Luzmina speaks Spanish. The officer spoke only English. So Luzmina walked outside, found a stranger on the street, a woman waiting for a bus, and asked her to translate. The stranger agreed. She walked back inside with Luzmina and told the officer, "This woman wants her daughter's police reports." The officer said, "She'll have to file a Freedom of Information request. It'll take weeks." Luzmina started crying. The stranger translated. The officer shrugged. That moment, that small, humiliating moment, tells you everything about what Daisy faced. A system that didn't see her, didn't hear her, didn't even have a translator at the front desk for a grieving mother. Luzmina eventually got the reports. She had them translated by a family friend. And when she read Daisy's words, "I fear my husband will kill me and my daughters," she collapsed. "They knew," she said. "The police knew. They had it in writing, and they did nothing." You'd think this would be an open and shut case. 4 murders, a confession, a mountain of evidence, the death penalty maybe, but New York doesn't have the death penalty, and Miguel Mejia Ramos wasn't going to trial. In November 2014, just 10 months after the murders, Miguel pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder. Why not 4? Because the legal system counts the murders of Daniela and Yoselin as separate counts, plus Daisy. That's 3. He also pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder as part of the deal. It's complicated, but basically, he admitted to everything in exchange for avoiding a life sentence without parole. On November 7, 2014, Judge Kenneth Holder sentenced Miguel to 45 years in prison. Not life. 45 years. Let me do the math. Miguel was 26 years old at the time of the murders. He'll be 71 when he's eligible for parole. That means he could walk free in 2059. He could still have decades of life ahead of him. He could remarry. He could have more children. He could watch the sunset from a beach somewhere. Daisy will never see another sunset. Daniela will never learn to read. Yoselin will never blow out a birthday candle. Before sentencing, Miguel asked for permission to speak. Through a translator, yes, the court provided a translator for him. He said, "I know this sentence is not enough to pay for what I've done. I ask forgiveness from Daisy's family. I ask forgiveness from my own family. I am sorry." Luzmina Alvarado was in the courtroom. She stood up and shouted in Spanish, "Sorry, you're sorry. You hugged my granddaughters and then you stabbed them. Don't you dare say sorry to me." The judge banged his gavel. Luzmina was escorted out. She waited in the hallway crying until the hearing was over. Roger Esmar, the family's lawyer, told reporters afterwards, "My clients are devastated. 45 years is a long time, but it's not justice. Justice would be Daisy and those little girls still being alive. Now let's zoom out, because Daisy's story isn't just one tragedy, it's a symptom. After her death, the NYPD launched an internal review. They admitted that the reports should have been translated. They said they were reviewing procedures to make sure it never happened again. They even suggested using computer software to automatically translate future reports. But here's the problem with that. Computer translation is notoriously bad for legal documents. Have you ever used Google Translate for something important? It gets the gist, but it misses nuance. And in domestic violence cases, nuance can mean the difference between life and death. What if Daisy had written, "He said he would take my daughters"? That could mean kidnapping, or it could mean custody. A computer might not know the difference. A human translator would. The lawsuit I mentioned earlier, the one from 2013, was eventually settled in 2016. New York City agreed to change its policies. They promised to provide interpreters within 15 minutes of a victim's request. They promised to translate all domestic incident reports within 48 hours. They promised to train officers on language access. But here's the question you should be asking. Did those changes actually happen? And are they enough? In 2018, a follow-up investigation by the Legal Aid Society found that the NYPD was still failing to translate reports in a timely manner. One case they found: a Spanish-speaking woman filed a report in February 2018. It wasn't translated until July 2018, 5 months later. By then, her abuser had already been released from custody twice. So no, the problem didn't go away. It just got better at hiding. I want you to put yourself in Daisy's shoes for a minute. You're 21. You're in a country where you have no legal status. You have 2 babies who depend on you completely. You have no money of your own. Your husband controls everything: the phone, the car, the money, the door. You're scared, but you're also brave, so you call the police. You fill out their forms, you tell them the truth. You even follow up the next day because you want to make sure they heard you. And then nothing happens. No call back, no letter, no officer knocking on your door to check on you, just silence. How would you feel? Confused? Angry? Betrayed? Would you call again? Would you give up? Would you pack your bags and run to a shelter even though you don't know where the shelters are and you don't have a car and you have no one to watch the kids while you figure it out? Daisy didn't give up. She called again. She filed again. She tried. And the system still failed her. That's not a failure of courage. That's a failure of infrastructure. A failure of accountability. A failure of basic humanity. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Abusers know about the language barrier, and they use it. Think about it. If you're a Spanish-speaking abuser and you know that your victim can't get help because the police won't translate her reports, what's stopping you? Nothing. You have a free pass. Miguel Mejia Ramos knew Daisy had called the police. He knew she had filed reports. He didn't care. Because he also knew that those reports would disappear into a black hole of bureaucracy. In fact, after his arrest, Miguel told a detective, "She called the cops on me twice. They never did anything, so I figured they never would." He said that, out loud, to a cop. That's the chilling reality. The system's failure didn't just hurt Daisy. It empowered her killer. Let's give credit where it's due. After Daisy's murder and the lawsuit settlement, New York City did take some steps forward. The NYPD created a language access plan in 2016. They hired more bilingual officers. They installed translation phones at every precinct. They started requiring that all domestic incident reports be translated within 24 hours. They also created a domestic violence unit specifically for immigrant victims, with social workers and advocates who speak multiple languages. Sounds good, right? But here's the catch. Those changes only apply to reports filed after 2016. For Daisy, they came too late. And for thousands of other women, the changes are only as good as the officers who implement them. In 2020, A report by the New York City Comptroller found that nearly 30% of domestic incident reports filed in Spanish still weren't being translated within the required 24 hours. Some took weeks. Some were never translated at all. The reason? Overworked officers, high turnover, and a simple lack of training. One officer told an investigator, "I know we're supposed to use the language line, but it takes 20 minutes to get someone on the phone. I've got 5 other calls waiting, so I just put the report in the file and say I'll get to it later." Later never comes. Daisy's case is the most extreme example, but it's not the only one. In 2015, a woman named Maria, last name withheld, called 911 from her apartment in the Bronx. She told the operator in Spanish that her boyfriend was beating her. The operator said, "I don't understand. Do you speak English?" Maria tried, but her English was broken. The operator hung up. Maria called back. This time, a different operator answered. He said, "We'll send someone." But the dispatcher sent the call to the wrong precinct. No one showed up for 2 hours. By then, Maria's boyfriend had left, but he came back the next night. And this time, he brought a gun. Maria survived barely. She spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Her boyfriend was caught and sentenced to 15 years. But when Maria's lawyer asked why the 911 call wasn't translated immediately, the NYPD said, "It was an isolated mistake." Isolated? Really? In 2017, a Chinese-speaking woman in Brooklyn filed a domestic incident report in Mandarin. It sat untranslated for 6 months. During that time, her husband found out she had filed it. He beat her so badly she lost hearing, and when the report was finally translated, it included the line, "He said if I tell anyone, he will kill me and then kill himself." The judge who read that report 6 months late called it a failure of the system at every level. These aren't anomalies, they're patterns. And patterns don't change just because we feel bad about them. I want to end with something personal, something that stuck with me. After Daisy died, her Aunt Sarah found a small notebook in Daisy's bedroom. It was a journal, not a fancy one, just a spiral-bound notebook from a dollar store. In it, Daisy had written notes to herself, shopping lists, reminders, and one entry dated November 29, 2013, the day after her last police report. In Spanish, she wrote, "Today I went to the police again. They took my report. The officer was nice. He said he would help me. But I don't believe him. No one has helped me yet. I pray to God every night to protect my daughters. If something happens to me, please take care of Daniela and Yoselin. They are all I have." That notebook is now in Luzmina Alvarado's house in Guatemala. She keeps it on a small altar with photos of Daisy, Daniela, and Yoselin. Every night she lights a candle and reads that entry. They are all I have. They were, and now they're gone. This story is heartbreaking. It's infuriating, but it's not hopeless. Because you listening to this right now have power. You can learn from Daisy's story. You can share it. You can ask questions about your own local police department. Do they translate reports? How quickly? What's their language access policy? You can donate to organizations that help immigrant survivors of domestic violence. Groups like the Violence Intervention Program, Safe Horizon, and the National Network to End Domestic Violence. They need money. They need volunteers. They need you to care. You can also just listen. If you know someone who speaks a different language and they're scared and they don't know where to turn, believe them. Help them find resources. Don't assume the system will work, because often it won't. Deisy Garcia believed in the system. She believed that if she followed the rules, filled out the forms, told the truth, someone would help her. She was wrong. Don't let the next Daisy be wrong too. Rest in peace, Daisy. Rest in peace, Daniela. Rest in peace, Yoselin. You deserved so much more. And so does every other person who just wants to be safe in their own home. Asterisk, if you or someone you know is in danger, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799. They have interpreters in over 200 languages. They will listen. They will believe you and they will help. Asterisk. That's the end of this story. But for too many people, the story is still being written. Let's make sure the next chapter is different.